Okay, welcome everyone to the Building Performance Podcast. Today's guest is Lisa Malyon. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
I've been saying all week knowing that you were coming on. Is it Malyon? Is it Malyon?
Yeah, no, Malyon.
Malyon,
Yeah,
you're happy
it's
with?
French Cornish.
French Cornish.
Yeah, it was Malyon.
Is that not technically Jersey?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Malyon.
Yeah.
So, thanks for coming down.
Welcome.
We met through a mutual acquaintance who has already been on the podcast already this series. Our good old friend Nathan Wood,
Yeah.
Mr. Flashy himself.
Yeah.
He is, that's in a good way, not in a weird way. He is a lovely guy, big on ventilation, and put us in touch. And after that, we sent you on our training course here at the Building Performance Hub with our wonderful facilities because of some of the super cool stuff that you're doing in ventilation.
Yeah.
And we'll get onto some of that. But as is customary, welcome. And do you want to just introduce yourself for the camera?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lisa Malyon and I'm the founder of Indoor Air Aware, which is a resource for families to help improve the air that they're living in at home and make sure that they have healthy outcomes and that they're safe and that a little child's lungs can develop properly.
That's quite an emotive word when you say little child's lungs. And as you, for those listeners that would have heard earlier in the season, heard Nathan talk, he admitted that he welled up several times when it comes to children and air quality, and it's something that clearly is very emotive to him, and something I think that will be very emotive to you. Before we dig in, let's just take it back. As with everybody, I have your career as declared on LinkedIn. I've not found any references. Could all be make-believe. But it looks like you left school, started in PR?
Yeah. I trained as a journalist. So
you should be in my seat.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was, so I trained as a journalist, so I did education and media. Thought I wanted to be an education correspondent. Which I suppose I am in a way, still educating people. But yes, I worked at the Leicester Mercury, which is my hometown, and then I worked for Unbeatable, which was a consumer electronics review site, and we were basically doing reviews for SEO. And then I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and I was just being pitched at by PR people.
Always wanted to go to the Consumer Electronics
Show. Oh my God, I absolutely loved it. It's the best memory. But yeah, so I was being pitched to by all these PR people, and I thought, hang on a minute, I can't be creative in my role as a journalist because I'm just having to write about what I'm given. I want to be on the other side. So then I went into PR, and I worked for Mark Bukowski, he's the talking head. You'll see him on all publicity type related shows. So I was very well trained there, and then went into the corporate world of PR.
Yeah, so rather than being told your narrative, you're creating the narrative.
Exactly, yep. So I've trained I've worked for 200 big brands, trained lots of CEOs for the Today programme and other big broadcast interviews. And I've worked in energy, actually, for the last 15 years. So I've worked for Centrica British Gas, at an agency, and then I've also worked for Utilita Energy for the last 5 years doing energy efficiency work.
Okay, and that energy efficiency work, I'm going to assume it doesn't include the one thing that everybody will be shouting at, or at least the ATMA members will be shouting at, which is blower door testing and how an airtight home can be 30% of your energy bill, or can reduce your energy bill by 30%. It's much more, at least the work I've seen from the major corporations, about tucking your curtains behind your radiators. And
oh my goodness, yeah.
And,
yeah. Well, I think the thing that I've come to, I used to get annoyed by seeing misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, anything you want to call it, utter nonsense. I used to get really annoyed by it. And actually what I've realised now is that everyone's just trying to give good advice based on their own knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's good because it's better. You can't let the great get in the way of good. So it's great that people are giving advice. But what I really want people to do is what I've done and take a better, more deeper interest in the subject matter so that advice can just get deeper and better all the time. But then what I have found is that the more knowledge you gain, the harder it is to dumb it down for people that have no knowledge. So then you find yourself on this whole new kind of journey of discovery and a challenge that you need to overcome.
Yeah, and I'm sure, at least in my experience, the more knowledge you gain and the further up the echelons of the science community you work, you'll find the more and more frustration because the real science of what's being taught doesn't make its way back down to the bottom.
Yeah.
So we have all of this knowledge and understanding of what a great home should look like, or a high-performing home should look like.
Yeah.
But the people at the very top and the people at the very bottom are so far apart on their views, and ultimately money tends to be the largest driver, and that for me is something that's really frustrating for me to get my head around. That we know the answers are out there. We could be talking ventilation, air tightness, acoustics, but actually taking that from the very top of the science right down to the very ground is something very difficult. We don't seem to do very well as a country.
No, we don't. And I think it's like looking at anything, like with, in Wales, government have got their head around the fact that net zero needs to be core of every policy. And I think that's brilliant. And that shows that they are absolutely dedicated to reaching net zero. And what I'd really like in our country is that health be at the core of every policy, because then there wouldn't be so many mistakes made in policy, so many people falling through the cracks, so many children on psychiatric wards struggling with social media consumption. It's just, we've got to think about people's health, the way our brains work, and also the physiological aspects of everything that's happening around us. By doing that, we're going to reduce the reliance and strain on the NHS. And we all have better health outcomes and happier lives.
Yeah, it's just so avoidable, and I guess that's the ventilation stuff from my own building performance background. You just think cold homes, people living in cold homes, choosing whether to eat or to heat their homes, it's completely avoidable.
Yeah.
And we don't need to change the materials that their homes are built from.
No.
We just need to build them in the right way. And I appreciate if you build a house in the 1960s, it's not going to be built. We have better standards than we used to, but in some aspects we have worse standards because some of those trades or some of those mistakes that we make just continue on through.
Yeah.
We have this wonderful construction, wonderful detail. We have the idea of insulation, but we don't have the idea of heat loss. We just don't seem to be able to quite understand that if you have holes in your building, they let out the warm air that you create, and some people call it ventilation, some people call it infiltration, exfiltration, but the science is there and we all know it. It's so far down the agenda in today's world, and particularly the Grenfell Tower stuff. We have this kind of structural being right at the very top. We don't want our buildings to fall down. We don't want them to catch fire.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone to zap themselves with electricity.
Yeah.
We don't want our plumbing to leak. But it seems after that, we're not really that fussed about how well the insulation's fitted, which does make an impact to somebody else, or how airtight the building is, which does make an impact, or whatever other part of construction we're looking at. And it's one of the frustrating things to me, is because I've been quite out there sometimes in saying the ventilation is a slow killer. I'm sure we'll get to talking about that.
The invisible killer.
Yeah, it's an invisible killer, but electricity will kill you super quickly.
Yeah.
It's a few seconds.
Yeah, so true. This analogy
generally your plumbing's not going to kill you very quickly. If your building falls down, it's going to kill you very quickly. So I understand, you're likely to fall down the stairs, it's going to kill you pretty quickly. It's turning into a very morbid podcast. But those are the things that we focus on so much or so heavily, and we have such good laws around those things that we just don't make those mistakes. We very rarely make those mistakes. But the silent killers are the ones we now really need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
It just feels like we skirt over them sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's evolution, isn't it? I mean, if you take us right back to caveman times, we had this concave structure that air could come in and go out of, and it provided shelter, and that was all really that they needed, because then they could create their own heat. obviously, it was combustible, and that was causing problems in terms of what they were breathing in. But what's happened is, as you know, you train people to make sure that homes are airtight. So all of that lovely, airtightness is meaning that the heating's not escaping. But in the process, we have now, and as a result, we have now a very closed box of lots of chemical reactions going on, because we are buying absolute utter rubbish off the shelves at the supermarket. We are washing our clothes in detergents that are bad for our children's lungs, our own lungs, anyone with sensitive lungs. And we're doing all of this without thinking, without realising what we're doing. So we're spraying this here, and we're wiping this here, and we're, this plug's shooting this out here, and it's all mixing together, and it's literally this chemical cocktail. And all of that isn't going anywhere unless you've got the right ventilation, which is why I did your course, because I needed to understand, so that when I go into somebody's house, I needed to understand, is your ventilation working for your health? And now I do.
And it's just, you've been on the course 2 days. We teach ventilation commissioning. I could quite easily stand from Monday to Friday and talk from ventilation design through to install, and the final 2 days be commissioning. It's a 5-day subject, and that's 5 days worth of training just on the impacts of ventilation, how to properly install ventilation, and how to design a system, taking it right back to its very simple core elements. But the ventilation industry just isn't protected or looked out for in almost any way, shape or form in the industry. We have ventilation installer certification schemes, but they're very poorly attended. I think I heard a stat recently from one of the big ventilation providers. They've trained 5,000 people, but only a few hundred have signed up to be certified responsible members that can be held to account. And it's just because we don't enforce ventilation in quite the same way that we enforce any of our other standards, such as stairs and electricity and all the things that can kill you quickly.
Which is crazy.
And that definitely needs to change. It's absolutely wild. But you hear me say in my training course, some of those lovely smells, the new home smells. It's you walk into a new home and you smell that freshly cut trim that goes around your doors and your skirting boards. Quite often contains formaldehyde. It's a pretty nasty, carcinogenic, cancer-causing chemical that you smell in your lovely new home. You buy a new car, and that outgasses all of the glue from the carpets. Some of that stuff is some real nasty chemicals, and we need to do better. We can do better to avoid, not necessarily using the glues and the woods, because that's the way we do it, but we need to be better at getting rid of those chemicals before they become a problem in our homes.
There should be an airing out
There's
process. A balance. 100%. I think, but it's speed, because you've got now the Deputy Prime Minister promising 1 trillion houses by next Wednesday, and however unlikely that is. It's great that they have a target and they're working towards it, but what will happen is that these new homes will be built, they'll be built fast, and they won't be built in the interest of people's health. So there won't be an airing out process, which should happen, or a super ventilation check, a health ventilation check at the point of 3 or 4 days before occupants come into the property, to make sure that all of those things have gone, because that could be the difference that first week in that property. So let's say there's a family and they've got a 2-year-old. That 2-year-old could get symptoms of asthma and then be diagnosed with asthma because of that first week in that property. Because of the ventilation.
Well, let's take it back to, so you've done plenty of PR stuff. You get involved in plenty of campaigns, Safer Child Parking campaign. Part of the founder and CEO of Picked. You do a lot, but talk to me. You've done a lot of PR work, and then out of nowhere you go ventilation. Why go from going to Vegas and playing with gadgets, and now why is ventilation top of your priority?
I've been on a really fast horrible journey. So when we lived in our old house, so we moved last summer, but in our old house we had a 4-bed townhouse with no garden, shared garden outside. So we were cooped up in this house a lot of the time. And on the top floor we had 2 children's rooms, our main master bedroom and a bathroom, very small bathroom, badly ventilated. At this point, so my mum's a nurse and my dad's a builder. So you would think that I would have, and I'm university educated with a knowledge of gadgets. Yeah. So you would think that I would be quite, au fait with what a vent is supposed to, do, or, ventilation system or a fan, an extraction fan. You would think that I would know what to do with the door when I'm showering. You would think that I would know, that mould can be invisible. But I didn't know any of those things. And that's why I'm doing this. So the reason I'm doing it, so Phoebe, my daughter, who is 9, we both kept getting chest infections after chest infections. Antibiotics stopped working. And then I was admitted to hospital with community-acquired pneumonia. And so I was on oxygen for 5 days in hospital on steroids. And it was just before COVID. And Phoebe has then since been diagnosed with asthma. And it all turns out it was because of where we were living. So behind the wallpaper, we had black mould. Underneath the carpet, we had black mould. And what was happening is we were showering, at least twice a day, 2 adults. All of that sauna, so all of the steam was coming out of the room and it was going to the coldest place, which happened to be I think it was east-facing bedroom, kids' bedroom, Phoebe's bedroom. And so we had a condensation problem on that window. Now, I couldn't see that we had a condensation problem because we had a blind up against the window and the blind was slightly tilted. And we didn't used to open it because then we had a big, massive bunk bed smashed up against this blind. So there was a ventilation problem. So the window was shut. All of the water was going there, draining down into the carpet, into the skirting boards, and wasn't going anywhere. And I didn't know because it was all hidden. Yeah. And that absolutely just pains me to.
I feel like you feel guilty about it.
Yeah,
but
I do.
I don't think you really should. I think, and I'm so glad you came on. I'm so happy you are speaking so candidly about this, because I think a lot of people just don't know.
No.
And I think about when I grew up in the house we're in, or my mum's house, still lives in the same house, and seeing mould all over the place. And back then it was just, you brush it off and you carry on.
Yep.
And I think if anyone's listening to this podcast has mould in their home and is in that regular cycle of brush it off and carry on, there's a fundamental problem. You need to address the fundamental problem. But you're not. There's no education out there. No one. If you buy a home, if you buy someone else's home, if you move in, no one ever says to you, "This may be a problem. There may be an issue here." And I think that's absolutely not wild, because I don't think it's reasonable to have training on your home unless you have some real expensive MBHR gadget or something in your home. But it's just, we need to raise awareness, and that's what I hope you're able to do through this. That you get, if you're trapping moisture in your home, if you have a nice airtight home, and there's nothing wrong with having an airtight home. That is the best possible science at the time with Passive House. Passive House is a perfect example of where we have a super, super airtight home, and we control everything else because we can control the environment and the humidity. We can control that through our ventilation. Yep. So that is best practice, but we need to understand or have better awareness that by closing all of the windows, we trap moisture in our homes. And that's not just moisture from the bathroom, that will be just from breathing, existing, running a tap, brushing our teeth. The moisture we create is it's just all over the place. Even as humans, we're constantly releasing moisture.
I call it you-dew.
You-dew, yeah. So, and that's just a problem. And chuck in a couple of unlucky environmental factors, such as not having sun on a particular wall, or it being an internal wall that's just always cold, and you've got the perfect environment for mould to grow. And
Yeah.
I think it's just something we need to be better aware of. That, you know, don't wipe the mold off and think that that's the problem. There are no magic paints. There are no magic mold removers for your grout in your bathroom or for the silicone. You can cover it, but you'll never get rid of it unless you fix the fundamental problem. And I think there should be information leaflets in any of those products that you buy.
Yeah.
And let me say now, if you see mold on the
You need to face
silicone,
the camera now.
yeah, if
If you see mold,
you see mold on the silicone or the grout on your in your bathroom, that is the first sign you have a problem with your ventilation, not anything else. Because if your bathroom is well ventilated enough, you will not see mold in your bathroom unless there's some extreme other circumstance. And I think that is super important that people recognise that. Now, we may not cut this bit out, Chris, but my wife keeps turning off the bathroom fan, and I'm forever
yeah,
shaking her and saying, "Come on,
yeah,
we do this for a living." But I think it leads nicely onto another point that a lot of the time people have bathroom fans and they just turn them off.
yeah,
And the number one reason in my experience is noise. A fan is noisy.
yeah,
And that, so straight away people turn them off because of what's it doing anyway? It's not doing anything. They turn it off and they can have a nice bath in peace. But actually they're turning off a vital part of their breathing strategy.
yeah. It's a great way of putting it. I said to somebody the other day on LinkedIn, if only ventilation systems, and when I'm talking about ventilation systems, let's say a bathroom, an extraction fan, if only it was fitted with as much care and attention as a CPAP machine, you know, breathing breathing apparatus in a neonatal ward. If only we were doing that, we wouldn't have this problem. And also then, you know, in a neonatal ward, the nurses are trained to use the CPAP machine to keep that child's, you know, breathing airways open. And that's the other bit that's missing. So even if we do fit an extraction fan with care and attention and make sure it's working and it's, you know, it's fitted with, you know, going to the outside, if that person doesn't know to switch it on, to keep it on, how long to keep it on for, if it's not on a timer, if it's not got a humid thermometer on there, then how do people? It's not going to be used, and then they're going to get that mold.
Yeah. And I think that part of that comes from, and I'm going to go against everything I've just said, is that a lot of homes we would have grown up in would have been fairly leaky, as in lack of airtightness homes, and the bathroom fan would have been there, but wouldn't have been doing very much because there's so much air movement through the home.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would have grown up in that environment. Everyone knows you have a bathroom and it's freezing cold because it's effectively the outdoor air. So you're not, you've got away with it, but through luck, not judgment.
Yeah.
So I think in older homes I've lived in where, that bathroom's absolutely freezing, but it's because air was zipping through it and you were having accidental air movement, not deliberate air movement. And that is, that's something that we need to change that mindset. I think when you then move into a modern airtight home, or not even a modern airtight home, a lot of the 1950s, early 1960s prefab buildings were built using huge concrete blocks, and they were dropped in. They are super airtight buildings, which is great. So as soon as the ventilation strategy fails you, either you turn it off or it fails, you develop problems very, very quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of them aren't also very thermally efficient, so you're able to get the cold, or you choose not to heat that room, you're going to develop these types of problems. So it's something. I mean, if it feels like between you and I, it feels like we're teaching people to suck eggs. But if we, if there's one person that is able to hear this and go, I keep scraping the mold off my grout, and I keep going to what used to be Wilkinson's. I think they now closed, and I buy the kits and I cover up the grout with various paints, or I use a vinegar and something solution and get them off. If there's anything I want you to do is to say, is your fan moving air? And if it's not, then we need to deal with the problem. Either change the fan, change the fan for a more powerful fan, or figure out another solution. Opening a window is perhaps one of the easiest things you can do, but not everybody can do it for security reasons, or their homes are already very cold and they don't want cold air to go through them. But such a small thing. Yours is unique because mould often happens in the bathroom, sometimes the kitchen, generally what we would consider wet rooms.
Yeah.
For it to happen in a bedroom is uncommon, I would say. Apart from sometimes maybe behind some wardrobes where you don't get much airflow, but for it to happen in a bedroom is incredibly interesting because
but it is very common, and the reason being is, and I'm seeing this through my work with energy suppliers, I've been working on fuel poverty for the last 5 years. So we did a really good study with Oxford University ECI, which was with Dr. Brenda Boardman. So she's the godmother of fuel poverty. So she actually was the one that came up with if you're spending more than 10% of your income on heat, then you're in fuel poverty. And
such a simple metric, but
so
straight away in my head I'm going, it's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it is. It's been they've built on it since, but I've just been working with her and Utilita, and it's just been brilliant. And essentially what we did is we gave the government a paper that said, so this was last summer, so it was just before Tory government went on holiday on their summer break. And so we basically said, this is how much money the lowest income households need in order to stay warm in the next winter. So this is to inform your policy, and it got ignored. Just ignored, and that was using all of this fuel poverty data. So what Utilita did is basically looked at where people hadn't topped up. So where they prepaid for energy, people just weren't topping up, and they could have been at a girlfriend's house and not at home, but it was more likely that they just didn't top up and they sat in the cold and dark, which is just horrific to think about. But the reason I was saying that is the fuel poverty. So there was, I've been on plenty of video calls through my work with Indoor Air Aware and through my work with Utilita, case studies and things like that, where they take you on a walk around their house, and what they're doing is they're keeping their kids' bedroom curtains shut. And then for some reason, I as a mum did it, we put our kids near the window because we think that even if it's not open, I guess it's the light or something, I don't know, to wake them up in the morning. But we put them near the window, and then so the curtains, big heavy upholstery up against the window, a bed up against that, and that window's not getting opened because it's not as accessible. And the reason, the latest one that I saw, she was in, oh my goodness, where was it? So northeast, and she was up on a hill. So she was in this really windy location. So she didn't have the windows open because the kids would be freezing.
Really feel it,
So she had the window shut, and she basically showed me, and it was the baby's cot. And there was mould on the cot. There was mould on the curtains. There was mould on the window. And I just said to her, you've got to get that baby out of that room. I said, that is as urgent as a fire in that corner where you're putting your baby. You didn't know anything about it, and I didn't know. And that's the really important thing about my campaign, is that I'm coming at it from a really honest viewpoint. I did something wrong, and I want to help every other mum out there avoid doing that. Or if they are currently in a situation where there's mould in a child's bedroom, then know how to get rid of it and how to get on top of it, which is the main thing.
Yeah.
So when you can't unknow it, you just know what to do.
I think everybody that works in the ventilation industry has a thing about traveling or staying in hotels.
Yeah.
And once you dig in just the tiniest amount, I was in a hotel just the other day up at the Institute of Acoustics, Acoustics 24, and we were exhibiting there, and I stayed in the hotel, which did have vent, it was extracting, but the air valve was almost all the way closed. I couldn't help myself. I just couldn't. Opened up the valve all the way.
Yeah. But did you then go and check all the others?
Well, I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, it may have been commissioned, but it certainly wasn't locked off.
No.
But you can't help yourself. You can't help yourself when you travel, and you ever go into, when you know a little bit about ventilation, you get into an Uber, and they've got the air conditioning off, everything's just turned off, and you're sat in a car with them, and the windows are steaming up. And You just want to go.
Yeah,
It
and they've
works
had a
the
garlic
same-
pizza bread the night before.
It works the same in your car as it does in your home.
Yeah.
And it's just a tiny version of your home. So if you turn if it's raining outside and you bring moisture from your clothes into your car and you turn off all the ventilation in your car, it steams up.
Yep.
And people always, when I've challenged them about it before, have no concept that the reason it's steaming up is not because of the outside, because, well, you've got a temperature change, but also you've brought in wet clothes into an environment now where that moisture can't escape, so it evaporates off of you, goes straight to the glass, and the inside becomes dangerous at that point.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed that
People don't get it, and people
don't get it.
yeah.
And you say, turn the air conditioning on, and they go, it's the middle of winter. Why would I do that? Because it dehumidifies the space.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to turn the aircon on and make it really cold. Turn the aircon on and make it really warm.
Yeah.
But you're going to dehumidify the space. It's going to take away that moisture. It's going to dump that moisture.
Yeah.
Not quite dump it, but it's effectively going to take it and put it outside.
Yeah.
And that's the way we should be thinking about our homes. If you're
It's a
exactly
micro
the same
home,
thing.
isn't it?
It's a
car.
micro home. It's a tiny environment.
Yeah.
But the human's bigger, so the effects happen a lot faster. In the home, we're doing the exact same thing, except that moisture is going into your plasterboard, into your skirting boards, into your trim, if you're American. And if that moisture doesn't escape and is able to leave, then you've got one of the requirements for life, which is water. The second one generally being heat. And the third one, when it comes to mold spores, is the ability to move. So just by dusting or by moving or having flow, when mold releases the spores, of which even in here there'll be billions of mold spores, not to put anybody off. And there's always billions of mold spores in the air, but it's when they settle and they're able to develop that it creates the problem. So having air flow for a home is super important. But we mustn't also think about how just having trickle vents open in a room is not airflow if the wind outside isn't flowing.
Yeah.
And it's something that I get faced with a lot when it comes to our air tightness and ventilation hats that we talk and we say, houses need to breathe. The amount of times I've heard that and I go, yes, houses do need to breathe, but we can't have houses breathing weather dependent.
Yeah.
So you can have a winter's day, humidity off of off yourself, off of the showers, you open your dishwasher, all of that humidity going into the air, potentially drying clothes inside. No wind means that's staying in your home.
Yep. Yeah, because
Straight into your
nothing's
ceiling.
moving it. Yeah. Well, this is it, and I think so. There's, I think what we've got, the kind of my take on it is that we've got to make it super simple. We've got to teach kids from, well, essentially birth. We've got to teach parents before they even have a baby about what air does.
It's a great shout. Yeah.
Yeah, and get it into
prenatal.
Yeah, it should be. I went to NCT, and what did they teach me on a knitted boob? They were showing me how to breastfeed. Now, breastfeeding is as important as the air that they're breathing in and out. And I read something, and it basically said, because if you think of a child, their lungs, because they're so teeny weeny, they're breathing like 10, 20 times faster than we do in terms of breaths. So they're in, out, in, out, in, out, whereas we're in, out. So they're getting 10 times the pollution that we're getting.
Yeah.
And that's, that really kind of hit home to me. And I was thinking, right, me and Phoebe, that's a good, we were both getting ill, but she got asthma, I didn't. And that's because my lungs were more developed. Obviously, I had pneumonia, but I think so. I think we need to get it into education, and that's the other thing. So in science, we talk about NCT, but also National Childcare Trust. But in science, I was taught, how to cool down a cup of tea by pouring a little bit on a saucer and drinking it off a saucer. That was the kind of stuff that I was being taught in science. Which, yes, that comes in really handy when you need to cool down your tea and drink it off a saucer, like the man from Last of Summer Wine. I think it's used.
I can tell you describe the parts of a leaf.
Yeah. You can describe the parts of a leaf. You dissected a bloody frog, like.
Well, we didn't get to that, but
or an eye. I think it was a cow's eye or something. Like, great. And I know that all of those things happen because they want us to be budding scientists and want to go into those industries, and that's really important. But if we're not here, because we've died of an asthma attack, then we're not going to become scientists, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, let's have a look at the science curriculum. Let's look at PHSE. So what is that? Something health, science, environment, social, environment. Yeah, that one.
Physiological.
It's come about since I was at school. So I sort of know what it is. And then, so bring them together and actually have a look at what is a healthy home. What do you need to have at home? You need to have space for people. You need to have this, you need to have that. And if you don't do well at school, you don't get those things. And actually some of that you won't have, you know, and bring it all together. I think that's the, what we're lacking in at the moment. And, you know, you need to work hard at school so that you can afford to pay for heat, because heat's really important. You can need to work hard at school because you're going to need to go and buy food, and the food that you can access is dependent on how much money you have and choices. So I think all of those things need to come together as part of PHSE and science. And I really want to be part of that. I want to make sure that every parent that already has children, every expectant parent, and every teacher knows about the importance of indoor air and ventilation.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been some improvement in schools. We're now seeing a lot more air quality monitors in schools, and one would hope that that information is being relayed. It'd be great if that was on screens, so that people can see it on a daily basis and say, oh, indoor air quality is poor today. Why might that be? It might be pollen. It might be some other reason. It might be raining and everyone's trapped inside. But I know it's happening, and I could only hope that some of that is being pushed on. But it would be interesting to let's have it as part of the curriculum. And I'm sure actually it's a very, very good point. A very, very good friend of mine is a science teacher.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll put him on the spot one day and say, if you had to drop something for something that might save a life one day, I'm sure we could find a gap in the curriculum. I'm sure we can drop something and have indoor air quality as a subject. Maybe.
Make an air chamber, grow mould. Like, if we grow mould, then we understand how it works.
Yeah.
But if we don't, we don't know mould, we hate mould, and we want to get rid of it. So, it's the first thing. It's like, the analogy that I use is like obesity. You can either fundamentally change what you're putting in your mouth to change your weight and your, behaviours, and your weight changes forever. Or you can go out and you can do the quick fixes and, all of the fad diets and the, gastric bands and all of those things, which, won't make a difference because you're just going to keep yo-yo dieting, and same for mould.
Yeah.
People are wiping.
The injections won't get rid of the fundamental problem
Exactly.
if you don't change the
as you were saying. You've got to change behaviours, but people don't know that. And actually sometimes it's, cognitive, dissidence, in that people they know what they've got to do, but they don't do it because they can't be bothered. But actually, I think if you're making people aware of the fact that you've got to do it not just for your own health, but those around you, then hopefully that will, start to make people change. Okay. But I've been working in behaviour change for a long time, and I've worked with a lady, Dr. Pippa Lally, she basically worked out how long it takes to form a new habit. And I love this sort of stuff. So basically, and she'll tell me off for saying this in such a blunt way, but 66 days it takes to form a habit. And that's forming a new habit, not breaking an old one. It takes much longer to break an old one. So that would be my challenge to everybody, would be, okay, so for 66 days, I'm going to do something that's going to improve the air in my home. So that might be opening a window when you're airing clothes. It might be, opening curtains in the morning and opening a window in a bedroom where you've had all of that dew, kind of condensation in your room. It could be shutting the door when you go in the shower to make sure that all of that sauna's not coming out. So it's just positive little tweaks and changes, and making sure that fan's on every time. But 66 days, 66 days you could save a child's life by changing your habits.
Yeah, and a baby exposed to mould will have problems with breathing for the rest of its life.
Yeah.
If we don't fix the problem or find the problem early.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess small steps.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wipe away mould and assume it's going to go away forever, or it's a one-time thing, or it's just winter. If it's there for a reason. So we need to change our habits, opening the windows when we're showering, making sure the room is adequately heated to encourage the air movement to dry out the air. But we can't just dry out a room and not expect that air to go anywhere. It has to move. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah. And I think that you've got a couple of, everyone's responsible. I think that's the other thing. So my big bone of contention at the moment is that you've got, people like the housing ombudsman saying it's landlords, not lifestyle. And then you've got landlords saying, well, hang on a minute. I've rented out this property to 4 different tenants. 3 of them had no problems with mould. 1 has had a terrible problem with mould. And I know for a fact that they're not using the ventilation system properly. That's really difficult because there's not much that landlord can do. They've given the tools, they've given that person a healthy home, but they've not used it so that in the right way. And I think that there's got to be something around that, some sort of better accreditation scheme so that a landlord can say, given you a healthy home. Now
we spoke about this, so this is one of the reasons I guess we first got in touch or put in touch is the idea, or is your something that you are actively creating, which is the landlord's certification scheme for air quality. I'm sure you have a more catchy name.
Yeah.
But effectively, it's a way of a landlord's highlighting that they are aware of ventilation, they are aware of its impact, and they are proud that they are renting a home that meets at least a decent level of ventilation requirements.
Yeah, I think I might be calling it airified.
Airified, I like it.
I'm playing with that one.
Trademarked?
Trademark that quickly.
Now been said out loud?
Yeah, I think so. And again, we can't let the great get in the way of good. It's got to be simple. It's got to be something that landlords don't have to pay a lot for, because a lot of them, if you imagine, people think, oh, landlords, they're rolling in it, got all these properties and they've whacked up the rent. Let's say, for example, you've got a landlord that's got their own home that they live in and they've got a mortgage on it, and then they've got another home that they rent out but they've got a mortgage on it, and mortgage rates have gone up. They might be actually losing on that property right now.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a misnomer about the types of landlords. A lot of it happens if they inherit a home. They can't necessarily, or they don't want to sell, or people get together that independently own homes, and suddenly they find they have 2 homes.
Yeah.
They're still a young couple or a couple that's fairly recent. They're not just going to sell a home and jump in. I think there's definitely a misnomer about landlords being this big greedy corporations. A lot of them are just people like you and I who are in situations. You have a home, you rent a home. Yeah. It's not a long-term plan, but it's done you well enough in the past.
Yeah. And they don't want any harm to come to the people in the home, but they might just not have the money that they need to make, big improvements. And I think it's nobody's fault, but we've all got to work together to get to better outcomes. And I think that's the one thing that I've learned in my career to date. I used to be quite feisty and, lobbying for this, lobbying for that, change this, change that. The one thing I have noted, I've realised is that there's no point in lobbying the government, because they've got their agenda. They're going to go and do whatever they want.
I have some personal experience of that,
Yeah, and I just think if you want to change anything, Lisa, you be the change. Don't wait for somebody to change a policy, because policies actually are so incredibly damaging in this space. So, that's the one thing that I've just kind of not, and I don't feel angry about that. I've just kind of given up in that, doing that. So actually I just make things happen myself now and innovate as well. So I can talk to you in a moment just about the monitors that I want to get into properties. But I've given up on kind of, taking people to task and so it's just all about us all working together. And I really want to hear the housing ombudsman say the same, because you can't be doing, with poor Awab, who lost his life because of being in a property that had mould and damp. Now, then legislation at the end of this year will come in, which will mean that if a private or social, social at the start. So if a social rented home has a mould and damp problem, then they have to, the landlord, the social landlord, has to get on the case basically within X many days, which is excellent, but it's a reactive measure. Now, instead of that law, and it's, with no disrespect to Awab and his family, is that what needed to happen is a proactive measure to stop that happening ever. Because once that child has lived in that property with that mould for one day, that's far too long. So, I cannot believe that we've got this reactive law, which I feel so sorry for the kids. That is just not fair. And that's why I'm doing this. So I am here to proactively help mums versus mould by giving them that little bit of science information, but dumbing it right down. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, because I needed it dumbed down for me. And making sure that every single mum, teacher, GP, everyone knows it. Here's a really, funny story for you. So I was sitting in a GP surgery with my daughter who was poorly, and he was sitting there with a mask on, windows shut, trickle vents. And for those who don't know what a trickle vent is that's listening, but I'm sure everyone does, is a bit of ventilation up at the window. Everything shut. And I said to him, wow, it's absolutely stifling hot in here. And he said, yes, it is, isn't it? Yeah, it's really stifling hot. It was an old house kind of renovated into a GP surgery. Zero ventilation. And I said to him, do you see those, the white things at the top of the window? And he said, yeah. I said, do you know what they are? And he was like, is it like a security system? And I said to him, no, that's a trickle vent, and that is designed to keep you alive, essentially, because it's going to mean that you've got an airflow and exchange into the room. I said, open it and see how you feel. Anyway, so he got up there, and while I was there, he opened it, and we both kind of our bodies just went, oh, thank God we had this fresh air. And it was just, you could see this penny dropping. That's a GP. That is somebody who is, trained to do no harm. Somebody that is trained to give people the knowledge, the medicine to make them better. And he's sitting there in his own carbon dioxide and everything that would have been whizzing around that room without any airflow at all.
Yeah.
That's concerning.
It is. And I don't know what the solution is in a commercial environment. It does get me pondering. But so your solution,
yeah,
and again how we came, is that landlords will have some way of showing their tenants for a badge, certificate, accreditation, name on a website.
Yep.
That they have done their minimum checks. Just talking about the plan on what they would do, a typical assessment.
Yeah. So I spoke to landlords first of all, because I always, working in comms, I always start right from the beginning, understand what the problem is, what the solution is. And the biggest thing was cost. So I said to landlords, you do know about ventilation, right? And they were like, kinda. And I said, okay, well, you obviously have health and safety directive, and you have to meet certain requirements for a home. And they were like, yeah. So I said, okay, fine. Well, how can we make sure that when you are handing over a property to a new tenant, that it is a healthy home? And they said, well, if we had to have somebody in, then that would be expensive. And I said, yep, that's right. So what I want to be able to do is basically give landlords a pack. So it could be a landlord, it could be one of the agents, a rental agent, or one of the ones that do the handovers and go in and check the property, inventory company. To basically have a pack where they can just do the test themselves and then submit the evidence to say that we've done the test ourselves, and we can do that in very clever ways to make sure, images are time stamped and location stamped and all the rest of it. And that would then give them a certification to say that you've cared enough to try. You have made, once you've submitted what you've submitted, we have told you additional things that you could do to improve it. And you may have gone away and done those things, and therefore you've got a higher rating. But the key thing is longevity. So the day, the minute that person walks in the property, that health can go like this, it can go like this, or it can go like that. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that it goes like that through education and monitoring. So what I'm proposing is that it's called Comfort Pal. So they get a little monitor that is stuck on the wall in each room where there's water or it could be humidity. So, for example, let's say a room where they dry clothes. And that will be updated to a central system. The landlord, he may want to write it into tenancy agreement to basically say that you have to use the ventilation system properly to maintain a healthy home. And with the permission of the tenant, the landlord would get notifications if humidity levels stay too high. So if a room isn't being ventilated properly and it's, high condensation issues, laundry issues, whatever it might be, cooking, then the landlord would get a notification at the point where before mould becomes a problem. So
if I was the landlord, I would definitely sign up for this, because I would want to know if the fan was being switched off. And I would want to know if there were high humidity levels in the rooms, because I would want to step in before it became a problem. And I think it's such a simple thing to do. It's
so
such a simple check. And I know in here in the Building Performance Hub, we have sensors. We have one there. We have 3, I think, in the house. We have one over here. We have one in my office, and we have one in the main office. So we covered displacing sensors so that we could better understand. And then I can't help myself, so I took the stuff home, and I have sensors in my own home that look at humidity levels over time. I've even convinced my neighbours to do the same thing. Because they were suffering from high humidity, so that they could at least monitor it and see if it's getting worse or getting better. And what is amazing is that just by having the monitors there, they are conscious of them, and they change their ways. They were opening windows a lot more. They were making sure that bathroom fan ran on its overrun rather than flick it off and flick it back on. It's another habit of people's, to stop the overrun of the fan running for 15 minutes. And it's made them think about humidity. Now, I probably could have just not had that turned on. And their behaviour would have been the same, but thinking that you're being looked at, and I don't want to go as far as it's breaching privacy, or because it's really not about that. It's about the home not being covered in mould and the health of the people living there. You wouldn't lend your car to somebody without making sure that they're insured to drive it. You're effectively lending your home, or you're renting your home to somebody. And you want to make sure that they're driving it carefully. So it's like a tracker on a car, but without quite the intrusion. So I have some personal experience in helping my neighbours through this, and knowing and seeing the benefits of having the sensors and making them think, I really need to air out this, because otherwise Barry's going to come shout at me. He's trying to help us out. So I think this is a really great idea. I think it's a great initiative. I'm going to be really... I think you've agreed I'm on the advisory board, so I'm sending emails every now and then to say, here's some ideas, and I cannot wait for this thing to be launched and get out there, and I will hands down try the monitors, put them in my house, and be one of the first people to sign up and go for it.
The key thing I think as well is that the monitors. So one of the main things for me is that we're importing so many monitors from China. And the monitors that are coming from China, the quality is very hit and miss. You can have a very good batch at the beginning, and then everything after that, you'd have to test every single product. So I'm actually I'm working with a UK manufacturer.
Great.
She's female. She's a female founder of a sensor manufacturing company, and I'm really excited about working with her. So bringing them to market. Now the cost will be slightly higher, but the accuracy will be spot on.
I think the costs... I feel we're in a world where a tenant will sue a landlord. It kind of has happened, baby out. There's many examples of this, but it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem. And this is a great way of a landlord being proactive and saying, I respect my boundaries, I respect my duties, but also the tenant, you need to respect yours. And that is to look after my home and to look after yourselves while you're in my home. So I'm excited to see it. A couple of questions then. So on every podcast, I always ask the same 3 questions at the end. And it helps me get a better insight as to who you are, what your drivers are, and it's a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
So first question, I haven't given you these in advance, you chose not to have them in
Yeah.
advance. If you could change one thing right now in the construction industry, what would it be and why?
That is such a good question.
It's a powerful one.
Really powerful. And it would be off the back of the late, great David Ormandy, who he responded to AWAB's legislation and passed away in the last year. And he sent me something and said, Lisa, if you can do anything, push this. And it was basically, it's more regulation, but it's around position of buildings. So his point is that a building that passes regulations in Wales can't be the same, the regulations can't be the same in Wales as they are in Cheshire, because it's the outdoor environment when it comes to ventilation, etc.
Yeah.
So what he was saying is that
outdoor air is not fresh air.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that'll be
on my gravestone.
Yeah. So so that would be the point, is the outdoor environment must be considered when looking at the regs for every single new housing development.
Yes.
And that's in memory of David Ormandy.
What a great answer.
Professor David Ormandy.
Okay, question number 2. Who is inspiring you right now?
You?
Me?
Yeah.
You don't have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, you. Nathan Wood from Farmwood.
We love Nathan.
He's super networked. Like, he just really cares. He does everything. Like, I don't know how he ever does any paid work, because he's always helping out here, there, and everywhere. I think that there's the ladies who are doing the Healthy Homes Hub. They're doing a great job, and I just so many people all around me. But I
think it's like, as I said earlier, you start and you go higher up into the scientific community and the people that really understand their stuff, and you just see that there's an entire network of people just screaming to do it right, trying to get it back down to the very bottom, and we're just met with resistance constantly.
Yeah.
We're all screaming, this is the science, this is the right way of doing it, this is almost free, almost cost nothing to do it right.
Yeah.
An example of mine is I've been fairly out there saying, let's stop allowing 100 mil fans, extractor fans in homes.
Yep.
Let's make them all 125 mil, because if I've got my maths right, it's a 56% bigger surface area for a relatively small increase in the size of the fan. But a bad 125 mil fan is almost as good as a good 100 mil fan, just because it's much easier to put more air through a bigger hole than it is a smaller hole. So there's definitely improvements we can make there.
Yeah, there is. I think that's the other thing, is that the nature of a scientist is that it's about accuracy, and that's the difference between me and a scientist.
Yeah, and so between us as well. I've been there saying, you need to have this stuff calibrated and you should do it this way, and you forever tell me on email, don't let good get in the way of great. And I have to...
Great get in the way of good.
Great get in the way of good.
Yeah.
Because everything I've done in my life has been unbelievable, to the 0.1 of a Pascal, to the 0.1 of a litre a second, to try and get everything as accurate as we possibly can get it. And sometimes I need to dial back myself a little bit, and you help me do that.
Yeah. And I think
would we rather have, a million homes be 1 litre a second under the regs, or 10,000 homes slightly over, or some variation of that?
Yeah.
We've got to be realistic.
Yeah, that's it. And it's about speed, and it's about awareness. And I think that's where we're a lot of everything that I learned on the 2-day commissioning course with you was all around new builds. And it's like, okay, well, there's me putting my hand up, but what about all of the houses, that already, is it something like 65% of UK housing stock is already is leaky and would need retrofitting? And
99%, I would say.
99, there we go.
Until we get them all passive.
Yeah.
That's the gold standard. Even then, Passive House has Passive House Plus.
Yeah. So retrofit, what in retrofit? So for example, what in an EPC is looking at air quality? So we've got energy performance certificate. Well, what about health performance certificate?
I think in some examples we've seen MVHR systems, which are arguably the best solution on the market. Some may disagree, but we're filtered air with lots of controls.
Yeah.
Excellent solution. Some would argue that, or some find in the EPCs, they actually reduce their EPCs because of the energy they use.
Yeah.
They make your house appear less efficient.
Yep. It can really
so a landlord could be on a D rating, fit an MVHR system which improves health, find themselves on an E rating and be unable to rent out their home.
Yeah.
And to me that blows my mind.
Yeah.
It should just not be a thing.
It's because they're not coming together. The professionals are not coming together when it comes to policy. But we won't go near that because it won't change.
Final question. Tell me something you'd have done differently in your career if you could do it all again.
Another great question. I would...
This is my journalism coming out.
Yeah, probably kept a diary.
Oh, okay. That's a great shout.
Yeah. Yeah, just so that I can kind of, I have got quite a good memory. And, kind of, as we all know, memories stay around where there's been heightened emotions. And I am a really passionate performer in any industry that I work in. So I have got a good memory. But I think a diary would be good because it's kind of like, what you learned that day and how you've developed over time.
Yes.
And your approach to work and that sort of thing.
I think that's a brilliant shout. A diary.
Yeah.
I could see that being helpful in a million ways.
Yeah, Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO.
There we go. There's already a name for it.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for coming down.
Thanks for having me.
As is customary, we'll shake hands and look at the camera.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, both on and off camera, hearing your story and hearing your journey. And you have the full backing of the Building Performance Hub, of ATMA, of SITMA, and if we need it, ATMA Australia and all the other companies we work with, to keep pushing indoor air quality and making sure that what happened to you guys will never happen to anyone else again if we can do it.
Yeah, thank
you. If we can save just one person, I'd be happy. If we can save 10,000, I'd be ecstatic.
Yeah.
So links to all of Lisa's socials, particularly Lisa's LinkedIn, is great. And we'll put a couple of links to some of the stuff we've chatted about below. Once again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for your support. And you obviously helped me to do the course as well. You funded it, so in doing that, I can now go into homes and I can check out a ventilation system and tell the person living there if that is impacting their children's health. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.